Good morning, welcome back. Could we start? Could we start to settle so that we can get started? We'll start in 1 minute. Okay. So that's 1 minute. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 or second session of our open-ended working group. I trust that everyone had a good night's rest. And we'll begin this morning with the report back from one of the co-chairs of the contact group for the terms of reference for the replenishment study. So I invite the co-chair, co-convener, whether it's Ralph or Miruza, to report back. Ralph, you have the floor. Netherlands.
Thank you. And good morning, everybody. This morning we had a first contact group and on the replenishment terms of reference. And I was very happy to be reunited with my former OEWG co-chair, so Miruza from the Maldives. And based on the text that was, or the CRP that was provided yesterday, we started the discussions. This text was in brackets, and then elements of the decision on the terms of reference replenishment study 3 years ago have been introduced back into this text, and there was a good discussion among them, the parties in the contact group, and a good exchange of views. But of course we need a little bit more time. In the beginning I still, because it was very silent, we thought we could finish in 5 minutes, but that didn't happen. So I request for a little bit more time during this week. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Netherlands, for the report back. Thank you to all delegations that participated thus far in the contact group. Of course, we will seek to give the group more time to finish their discussions. So we will move on to conclude the agenda item that we finished on yesterday. So yesterday we were on agenda item 4, presentations from the TEEP on the various progress reports, and we were at the questions on any other TEEP issues segment of that session. By the closure of that meeting, we had agreed that all of the questions from the delegations that indicated an interest in asking questions, that list would have been closed yesterday, and that we would resume this morning with relevant members from the TEEP here to respond only to those questions. So to be clear, we will not be accepting new questions this morning. We will just be having the responses to those questions. If delegates have questions, you're always free to discuss with the TEEP in the margins. So at this point, I would like to invite the TEEP to return to the podium, to the platform, so that you can respond to the questions that were posed yesterday from parties. Relevant members of the TEEP. So just as a reminder, we had gone through all of the progress reports, and then there were questions on any other TEEP issues that were not covered in those reports. And we did have questions from Norway, USA, Senegal, Argentina, Canada, EU. I see Bella is here. So over to you, T.
Good morning. Starting out with the question from the distinguished delegate from Senegal, where he asked, in which sectors is nitrous oxide used? Just very briefly, nitrous oxide is an ODS, a very large ODS. It is listed under the Vienna Convention, but not controlled under the Montreal Protocol. Nevertheless, the protocol follows up on nitrous oxide uses and emissions, and the SAP continuously is informing us about emissions of N2O. Agriculture is by far the largest source of human-induced N2O emissions and accounts for about 2/3 of these emissions. Other important sources and uses of N2O include industry, medical uses, fossil fuel combustion, biomass burning, and wastewater. There is ample information on N2O, which he was asking after, and we're happy to meet bilaterally if you would like more information on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. We had a number of questions from parties on our organizational options. This included Norway, the US, Canada, and the EU. Canada and the EU were specific to the organization options for the MCTAC. So I wanted to start by providing maybe a little bit of context in how we responded to the decision after considering a broad range of options. We looked at anything from dissolving, splitting, merging, establishing new talks. We looked at the full gamut of options. TEEP provided what it considered to be viable options for the future structure of its talks, given anticipated workload and the needed coverage of issues for parties under the protocol. After some discussions while developing its response to the decision, ultimately, TEEP did not intend to indicate a preference in its presentations of the two viable options per the talks. While we tried to ensure we were objective and not leading parties and letting the pros and cons speak for themselves for each option, we understand that some of the discussions within the talk sections may indicate a leaning to one over the other options, but we considered all options to be viable. As mentioned in our presentation, we provided those options for future configuration that we considered viable. This does not limit consideration of other options not presented, and TEEP would welcome further discussion of these with parties. We also know that TEEP has requested no change in the near term in order to meet its current workload for parties. So we feel there is no immediate need to install a new structure, and there is time to consider other viable options to make our work for parties manageable as well as sustainable for the longer term. With regard to the, I can start and maybe pass it on to Ashley, but with regard to the comments and questions related to the MC talk options from Canada and the EU, MC talk is our second largest talk, covering a broad range of topics on uses of controlled substances in sectors not otherwise covered by the other talks. Currently, the three co-chairs heroically manage a single committee with informal drafting groups covering medical issues and then all other chemical-related topics. So just to clarify, option one really formalizes the current operation of a single committee with formal subgroups and a fourth co-chair to help manage the increasing workload and broad coverage areas. Option two splits the committee according to the previous subgroups, but then coming under a single committee with two co-chairs for each talk. Let me turn it over to Ashley. I think about, parties had asked about what is the change? How does this make it sort of more efficient in terms of option one and option two?
Thanks, Bella. So I think the MC talk, as described, does have a changing agenda right now. It's broadening chemical agenda, as Canada pointed out, and a medical agenda that's developing pretty quickly. And so it needs expertise both within the committees and within the committee and the subgroups, which effectively is how we operate at the moment, or at least in the last year, to cover these topics. And it also needs leadership in those topic areas. So currently we have three co-chairs who are chemicals people. I've moved across, as I'm speaking today, or spoke yesterday about the inhalers, and of course I have that knowledge, and because I'm a member, I can support that group. But I think it does need a medical leader. That's why, specifically, I think we need a fourth and maybe even a fifth co-chair to cover all the areas. It works efficiently as a single grouping, and there is some cross-cutting issues, perhaps less than our talk, but still significant, I think. The other option would be to say that, you know, we should go back to where we were 8 or 10 years ago when inhalers had CUNs and there was a lot of activity, and you needed a separate TOC to organize it. And you could argue as well the same for chemicals with the broadening. But the MC talk met, and they've done, as a group, consulted widely, and the current review of pros and cons, I think, leads you to a conclusion. But we could make them both work, I think. They're both, as Bella said, viable options.
I think we had one additional intervention from the distinguished delegate of Argentina regarding PFAS. We appreciate the comment in terms of TEEP to consider various scenarios and what's happening in certain regions and the impacts, in particular on the foam sector with sort of with the PFAS regulations. So as we presented, the TEEP continues to follow these issues and certainly to follow the impact on sectors through our progress reports as well as through the coordination with the other panels for assessment reports. So thank you for the comment, and certainly look forward to providing more updates to parties on this.
Thank you, Teep. I hope that the delegates who had questions were satisfied with the responses provided. Thank you very much. I will now, you may return to your seats. I will now hand over to my co-chair, Annie, who will present agenda item 4A.
Thank you very much, Chantel, and good morning to everyone. I see that Argentina has asked for the floor. If you have a follow-up question, are you able to take that up bilaterally with the team? Okay, sorry, Argentina, you have the floor.
Hello, dear co-chairman. We have basically what we need uh, to say is that a year has gone by and we need to have concrete information concerning what is going to happen from now on, concerning the PFAS, what has been looked into for that, and also we need to know who is going to be available or not. So we need to make things clear in the report, because the request was put in a year ago, and we need to understand what the options are in order to determine who could use the hydrocarbons or natural solutions in order to find substitutes for these substances. And this should be reflected in the report that will be published after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Argentina. I also note that under agenda item 4D, the issue of PFAS is listed as a separate issue, so that may be also an area where you may reiterate the concerns that you've expressed. So we will now move to consideration of the sub-items under agenda item 4D. And the first one of these is 4A on life cycle refrigerant management. Parties will recall that in addition to requesting the TEEP for an update on LRM, MOP 36 had also encouraged parties to submit information related to LRM activities to the Secretariat by the end of May this year. I'd like to thank parties for the 13 responses received, and these submissions, together with information on existing programs that support LRM efforts, have been compiled by the Secretariat as requested and is available on the Ozone Secretariat's website. We also heard the presentation of the TEEP on its update of LRM, and there were some questions and answers in relation to that issue as well. Under this agenda item, we also have the proposal submitted by Cuba to consider. This proposal is related to inventories of refrigerant gases nearing the end of their life cycles in Article 5 countries. And the text of this proposal can be found in Annex 2 to the note by the Secretariat. So we have sort of two separate issues to discuss. Firstly, I suggest that we have a general discussion on the issue of LRM based on the information that's been made available to the parties by the TEEP and through the submission process. And then secondly, we will move to the issue of the Cuba proposal. So I now open the floor for any parties who wish to comment on the issue of LRM to start with. The floor is open. I have one party so far who has asked to take the floor. If any others wish to take the floor, please be quick. We are a little behind the times and I'm likely to move fairly fast. So Nigeria, you have the floor.
Good morning and thank you, Madam Co-Chair. The critical importance of LRM to minimize emissions alongside facing down HFCs cannot be overemphasized. However, as TEEP is providing us with comprehensive overview of LRM, there is also the need to consider providing information for establishment or upgrade of existing laboratories to support and monitor LRM activities, especially in Article 5 countries. such as reclamation and destruction of used of contaminated refrigerants. These laboratories are to be managed by dedicated reclamation or destruction facilities with the objective of ensuring proper verification, monitoring, and compliance with international acceptable environmental standards during the process. Specifically, the laboratories will, 1, provide analytical and quality assurance services for refrigerant reclamation or destruction operations. Secondly, the laboratory will support data, reporting, emission monitoring, and safety protocols. 3, the lab will complement HPMP and future KEEP implementation. Finally, TIP should consider providing additional information on integration of laboratories into existing or new reclamation or destruction facilities, as well as providing information in identifying appropriate technologies and institutional models to ensure that they are effective and sustainable operations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your observations, Nigeria. They are well noted. I have one more country on my list, which is the EU. I will close the list at the end of the EU presentation unless there are more parties wishing to take the floor. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We would also like to thank the members of the TEEP for providing us with the updated information on LRM developments, and also would like to extend thanks to the Secretariat for providing the compilation document on LRM-related information as a follow-up to Decision 36.2. It's positive to see that 13 parties have submitted so far relevant information, and we would just plead not to lose the momentum and to encourage other parties that have not yet done so to do. It is really a source of inspiration and information for all on this very important topic. Very shortly, just a comment to TEEP, just to complement the information already available on EU data. Under our new EU law on F-gases, reclamation facilities must register in our central system, and they must report on a yearly basis on the quantities reclaimed and recycled. This is a new obligation. The first data that we have received for 2024 activities is pointing to an increased number of companies reporting, and as a result, we have seen that there is an increase of approximately 250% of quantities reclaimed. This is due both to the fact that previously reporting companies have declared higher quantities of reclaimed amounts, but also because we have an increased number of reclamation companies reporting. So very encouraging trends on EU data in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, EU, for those observations. So the last speaker under this part of the agenda item is Saudi Arabia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I would be given my intervention in Arabic.
The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia supports the initiatives that take into consideration national policies and programs towards the LRM. We affirm that the comprehensive management of the life cycle of refrigerant management must be voluntary, and the phase down and should not be connected to the phase down of the hydrofluorocarbons. In this respect, we reaffirm that technical support must be given to the countries that are willing to adopt these initiatives in order to improve its legislative and technical infrastructure. The Kingdom is willing to strengthen international cooperation towards safe management of the refrigerant management and protect the interests of such countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saudi Arabia, for those observations. So we will conclude this particular part of this agenda item. I didn't see any particular requests for further action during the course of this meeting. So this area of agenda item 4A is now closed. So thank you very much to the delegations that took the floor. We now turn to the proposal from Cuba, which is contained in Annex 2 of the note from the Secretariat. This proposal may, I understand, be turned into a CRP if there is interest in further considering it. But in the first instance, I would like to invite Cuba to take the floor to present its proposal. Cuba.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The document which we present lays out the arguments in order to find solutions after the pandemic with the end-of-life refrigerant gases, which will soon need to be destroyed. We consider that, first of all, we must know what is the scope of the problem. Secondly, whenever possible, to try to determine what possible solutions may exist to attempt to get rid of these substances with the existing technologies. We know there is a great determination to bring to an end the use of these substances, but we need to look for the most adequate solutions in order to achieve this. And we need to supply information in order to provide sufficient ground for in-depth studies, and there would be a possibility then to contribute useful data for the process of repositioning and transition. We need to recall also that there are serious possibilities to overcome this, and we need this proposal to be finally included in the TEEP work schedule. And for those countries where the quantities of such substances are significant, we need to be sure that these substances which have a secondary emissions issue must begin to be included in the future so that we may have useful deliberations on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cuba, for your observations and introduction to your proposal and what the intention is. I now open the floor for any comments or reactions to the proposal from Cuba. If there are no comments, okay, I see a couple of delegations wishing to take the floor. Micronesia, followed by Saudi Arabia. Micronesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Thank you for the floor. The Federated States of Micronesia echoes its support for the proposal by Cuba and would like to also express its interest on the inclusion of updated relevant information of life cycle refrigerant management in the TEEP's 2025 progress report. Micronesia believes that for the end-of-life use, transitioning to LRM, it's time for it to evolve, and would like to discuss this in further discussions, if possible, and if proposed in a contact group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Micronesia, for your succinct intervention. Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We would like to start our intervention again stating that it's going to be in Arabic. تود المملكة العربية السعودية بداية أن تعرب عن تقديرها لمبادرة كوبا بشأن إدراج دراسة تحليلية حول تراكم كميات كبيرة من الغازات ذات القدرة العالية على إحداث الاحترار العالمي أو GWP في بعض دول المادة الخامسة وأن مثل هذه الدراسة يمكن أن تساهم
I'm
في
sorry,
دعم
can I just pause you? I'm not sure we're getting interpretation through.
أوكي. The interpretation will catch up.
Yes, please go ahead, Saudi Arabia.
تود
Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would like at the outset to express its appreciation to Cuba for the proposal on including an analytical study on the accumulation of a large number of GWP gases in some of the A5 countries. Such a study can contribute in the implementation of Montreal Protocol and its environmental goals. However, we have one simple reservation, that is to include any reservation of such gases in the carbon markets. Such inclusion might run counter to the Montreal Protocol and can run counter to this important legal framework. We believe that the text must be restricted to the technical and economic capabilities of getting rid of such gases without any association to the carbon markets. We can further discuss this topic within the contact group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saudi Arabia, and thank you for your observations. We haven't decided on a way forward yet, so we will wait to hear the views of other delegations. Granada, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Madam Co-Chair, I would just like to make a very succinct presentation, a reaction to Cuba's presentation, and to say that this issue is of immense significance to a number of Article 5 countries. It has implications for us meeting our compliance obligations in respect to us having very, very challenging baselines and at the moment increasing consumption of HFCs. And so whatever information that can be made available to assist Article 5 countries in addressing this particular issue is most welcome. Wherever this discussion goes, we would like to be a part of it, whether or not it goes as a contact group, an informal group, or otherwise. We would like to be a part of that discussion. But in principle, we support the presentation that is made by Cuba, and we look forward to whatever additional information that the TIP can provide that would assist countries in dealing with this particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grenada. I have three more countries on my list now. That is Canada, followed by Kuwait and the EU. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and would like to join others in thanking Cuba for presenting this proposal for a TEEP study related to the disposal of waste refrigerants containing controlled substances. The proposal, as it is, was not, I think, as you pointed out, framed as the usual kind of draft decision that we would consider. So at first, we were not completely clear what was being requested. What we understand is being requested, and perhaps Cuba can correct me if I'm wrong. One is that the TEEP would undertake a study to estimate the quantities of waste refrigerants that have accumulated around the world. So this would be, in a sense, just a factual account of the quantities of refrigerants that are not usable anymore and that contain controlled substances, particularly high GWP substances. And the second one is to provide information on the capabilities that exist in various countries for reclaiming and destroying such waste refrigerants. So that's our understanding essentially of what would be requested within this TEEP study, but I think I would like to at least have a confirmation by Cuba that that is the case, so that we're discussing the same issue. We also know that there was a reference to the carbon markets, but we were not sure sort of what was the intention there. Was the intention to have the TEEP to provide more information on these carbon markets, or perhaps that's a clarification that the distinguished delegate from Cuba could provide. But just some initial reaction. With respect to estimating the quantities of refrigerants that is unusable and could be destroyed around the world, I think it's important to look, first of all, at the information that we may already have. So as we know, under the multilateral fund, we're approving many projects to develop inventories of banks of controlled substances, including amounts that could be sent for reclamation and destruction. So perhaps there's already some information that's being developed in this area, at least for the many countries that have requested this assistance. As well, and this is more a question to the Technology Economic Assessment Panel at some point. I don't know if we can ask them questions during this agenda item, but we would be interested to know, because we have seen in previous reports that they have developed a model to estimate global banks of refrigerants, and to what extent would this model be helpful in identifying quantities of refrigerants that are coming to end of life and need to be either reclaimed or destroyed. We think that the TEEP may already have some data or some information on this. So this is just, first of all, to establish what we may already have, and then seeing whether or not there's a need to undertake more research and analysis on this issue, and then how we would frame that if that's the case. On the second element, I guess we see some value in parties having more information on the capacities to dispose and reclaim of refrigerants around the world. As we know, many parties don't have such capacities, whereas others do. We note that there is already annually, the Secretariat compiles a list of countries with reclamation facilities. I don't think that we necessarily have a list of countries with destruction facilities, but again, I guess we would be interested to know, perhaps from the Secretariat, if there is already some information in that respect. If there is information, I mean, we do think that probably we don't have comprehensive information on this issue. We're not sure that the TEEP itself would be able to provide meaningful information on such capacities without some kind of request or invitation to parties that have those capacities to submit information. So that's just something to think about, that perhaps as a first step, we may want to think about an invitation to parties that have capacities for reclamation and destruction to provide some information if we were to go down that route. Just another question that I have for Cuba is, Cuba implemented under the Multilateral Fund a project some years ago to refurbish a cement kiln to destroy controlled substances, and subsequent to that, they were able to use that incineration facility to destroy some CFCs. So would they be one of the parties that could have such capacities to destroy such refrigerants? And if so, I guess perhaps as a sponsor of this proposal, perhaps they could provide some information about their own capacities if they have so to other countries. And finally, although this is not directly related to this issue, I think it's related to the agenda item. We never talked about the information that the Secretariat has posted on this website related to LRM, decision 36/2, as a Secretariat to post not only the submissions from parties, these have been posted, but also various information on international initiatives related to life cycle refrigerant management. And we noticed that there is a link to these documents, and we very much appreciate the wealth of information that the Secretariat was able to collect and post on this website for us. And perhaps in thinking about this proposal, parties could also have a look at some of this information to see to what extent, you know, there are some elements that could be of value to our consideration of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. I note that you have some questions posed to Cuba and a question to the TEEP and a question to the Secretariat. We will come back to those questions. I have a reasonably full list at the moment. Next on my list is Kuwait. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and I would like to thank Cuba for this submission. I think that a lot of my idea was being captured from several delegates, but I will emphasize on what a distinguished delegate from Saudi Arabia was mentioning, and especially on the specific of the carbon credit, that we are not in favor to save something here and we create another problem and we give the leverage for others to emit as much as they want because we are giving them these carbon credit, and we are insisting that the carbon credit, in my point of view, is a crime for the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kuwait. On my list at the moment, I have the EU, Bahrain, Mozambique, United States, and Norway. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. And firstly, we would like to join the number of parties thanking Cuba for their proposal and for drawing attention to this matter. The EU is definitely willing to engage in discussions, as LRM is an important topic for the EU. We also noted that the proposal from Cuba is not in this regular CRP format, as Canada also noted, that we would normally discuss in a contact group. So we would welcome a number of clarifications suggested by Canada. And in our intervention here, we may have assumed some of the understanding that Canada also alluded to. So we would like to have more information on the request to the TEEP to analyze inventories in A5 parties, as we are concerned that this request to a great extent may duplicate ongoing work on surveys and national plans done under the XCOM. And we note that there is ongoing work on inventories and that a funding window was approved at the 91st XCOM on recycling, reclamation, and cost-effective destruction, and that this funding window remains open. We also took note of the XCOM decision 93/104, requesting the 97th XCOM to consider establishment of a funding window to support the implementation of LRM. And additionally, on other international activities, we've noted the work ongoing under the Basel Convention on the environmentally sound management of refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment, including the environmentally sound refurbishment of these products. So we are wondering if what is asked here may be a premature task for TEEP, as countries are still developing their inventories and plans under some of these projects. And we are aware of a number of existing studies and the ongoing projects under the MLF that has not been analyzed yet, so they are not available to allow the TEEP to draw from these experiences and this data. On the point on carbon markets, we also noted the mention of these voluntary carbon markets, and while we see that they can play a role in incentivizing recovery activities, We caution that carbon markets can also have unwanted incentives. And we also want to underline that recovery and destruction funded by carbon markets should not be used as a pretext to continue emissions of greenhouse gases that should have been abated. So with that, we welcome clarification of that number of points, including particularly the additionality and usefulness in relation to ongoing activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, EU, for those questions and your points of view. Bahrain, you have the floor.
شكرا سيدة الرئيس المشاركة وأسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير. في البداية أشكر.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. First of all, I would like to thank Cuba for this proposal. I understand their concern with regards to analytical study on medium to long-term solutions on the accumulation of refrigerant gases. I also support that this topic must be discussed in any form that you find suitable, whether within the contact group or otherwise, as will be agreed. I also support the intervention by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to de-link this topic from the carbon market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bahrain, for your flexibility. Mozambique, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora copresidente, por haber dado la palabra. Señora.
Thank you very much for giving us the floor. At the present, we have been confronted with a series of environmental problems in the country, and the words that are being used by the delegation of Mozambique must first of all extend thanks to the Republic of Cuba, which made a point which is of great interest for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mozambique, United States of America, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and in the interest of time, we will not repeat some of the previous comments made from other delegates. We do find this topic interesting and of value to all parties, as all parties do need to address what happens with controlled substances that are being used and are available to be recovered, recycled, and reclaimed. Destruction from our perspective is an option you consider when that refrigerant is no longer, or that substance is no longer able to be cleaned up and reused. We have a number of concerns that we would like to see addressed, and again, I don't want to reiterate what other parties have said. We similarly do have the concerns on the carbon markets and how that would be used for a substance that is already or continuing to be produced and used. We did note that there's been a few interventions on reclamation facilities and destruction facilities, and would note that there could be value. I believe Canada suggested, and perhaps a list of facilities that are available and have capacity for reclamation or destruction. We'd also note that the TEEP has provided us and has regularly updated a list of approved destruction technologies, and it would be useful to know to what extent parties are using those technologies. So there are a number of areas for which we could see further requests to the TEEP, but we also note that at this point we don't see a concrete proposal that we can react to or respond to, so we will leave it in the co-chair's hands as to how best the topic is taken up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United States. I have two countries on my list now. That would be Norway and China. I would like to close the list of countries. I would like to then go back to the questions that have been asked to the TEEP and to the Secretariat, and then finally I will revert to Cuba to respond to some of the questions that have been raised, and then also to see if they will be bringing forward a CRP which would facilitate discussion. So I'm just putting you on notice, Cuba. I will close the list when Norway has finished speaking. So I see that St. Vincent and the Grenadines has joined the list. But when Norway has finished speaking, the list will be closed. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I don't know if I should speak long or short then. So we consider it is important for the Montreal Protocol to continue to address the issue of life cycle refrigerant management, and we thank Cuba for putting this proposal. We note that some elements of the proposal would create duplication of work that is already undergoing in several countries. And we also acknowledge that comprehensive information on regulation, financial and technological resources, capacity building, as well as cost and challenges has already been provided by several parties, and we would like to thank the parties that have so far submitting this information. However, we see it could be some added value in requesting some specific information on the capacities of reclamation and destruction facilities in relevant countries. Actually, in Norway, when we look at options for managing used refrigerants, we have already a couple of times faced some challenges to find capacity available in a reasonable time frame. And we expect that those challenges will increase globally, as the volume of used refrigerants to manage is expected to increase in the upcoming years. So we are interested in discussing further this item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norway. So I have 3 speakers on my list, and the list is now closed. That is China, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Colombia. So China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. First of all, would like to thank Cuba for proposing the text. We believe that the LRM bank in the world is already huge and it's increasing. So the LRM is an important issue. Many countries, especially developing countries, face challenges in reclamation, in reuse, and the destruction of coolants and refrigerants. We support conducting in-depth discussion on such issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, China. St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Ce n'est pas
Thank you,
Saint-Vincent et Grenadines, c'est le...
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it's Senegal. We shifted. I think it's because we shifted our seat. We were not seated in alphabetical order, and we decided to self-correct. I'm sure the Secretariat will attend to this later on. Now, what I wanted to say, what I wanted to confirm, is our interest in participating in all of the discussions regarding this study which Cuba has presented. And in passing, we'd like to thank Cuba for having presented this very important opportunity to discuss the topic. A great many questions have been asked, and we wish to participate in any discussions which might take place organized by the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senegal. I am sure the Secretariat will fix the microphone allocation issue. And last on the list is Colombia. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora copresidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us the floor. Since it's the first time our delegation speaks, we wish to express our thanks to the Kingdom of Thailand for having hosted this meeting and for having extended great welcome to all the delegates, and wish also to thank the Secretariat for all the work that has been performed in order to prepare this open working group meeting, and we wish to thank again Cuba, as other delegations have stated, highlighting the importance of this proposal, the need to develop develop an in-depth study of the accumulation of refrigerant gases which exceed the capacity of the Article 5 countries to actually handle the problem. And we would like this study to be accepted, and we need to determine the way in which the Article 5 countries will be able to work on these issues in order to make it possible for all to regulate the import of these refrigerant gases and to develop a means of destroying them effectively. Also, we think that the informal group should be able to give us the opportunity to take up the proposal made by Cuba, which again we wish to thank very much for having made the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Cuba. I would like to now turn to some of the questions that have been posed. So I'd like to turn to the TEEP. There was a question to the TEEP from Canada about its model for estimating banks and whether it would be useful for looking at ODS coming to the end of its life. So TEEP, can you please answer this question? Thank you. TEEP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thank you for the question from Canada. And I think Canada just asking us to confirm, yes, in previous reports related to sort of banks and end-of-life management, we have modeled a lot of the available information in terms of inventories and the opportunities for destruction of some of these banks, where a lot of the information was not directly available. I would note that these are generally global banks, and if the if there's the interest is sort of country specific, we would need sort of additional data or supportive parties to get it to that level of specificity. We have reported in terms of a global bank model, and that can be done sort of again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, TEEP, for that clarification. I now turn to the Secretariat to talk about its its list of reclamation facilities. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Yes, I would like to note that on the Secretariat website, under the country data tab, and there is we have another tab which is called additional reported information, and then we have responses of the parties to different decisions. One of them is the response of the parties on a request to provide data on and information about reclamation facilities in response to paragraph 4 of decision 6/19. So the Secretariat has posted there all the submissions which were received, but they cover a period of time from 1996 to 2000. That was the last submission we received. After that, we have not received any more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretariat, for that clarification. So now I turn to Cuba. There were a number of questions posed to Cuba from Canada and the EU in relation to the scope of the proposal, but also in relation to possible duplication of activities, and also whether you have information on your own capacity. I would also like you to opine on whether you'll be bringing forward a CRP to this group. Thank you. Cuba, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. The first question which was made to us by the representative of Ghana, was to define a type of a mandate or terms of reference in order to make it possible to have this in-depth study of the accumulation of gases in countries which are basically all Article 5 countries. Now, we received funds from the Multilateral Fund many years ago, and we began to use them in the country in order to accumulate some experience in the destruction of these gases. Now, quite clearly, the destruction method is linked to a concrete and cement manufacturing plant. And so in the first part of the preamble of our proposal, we have made clear that the economic situation which has prevailed in our country in the last few years, which has meant that we were not able to continue destruction with the speed that we would need to have in order to be successful. And it's also these gases which were recovered in a process of elimination of the gases which are required to be eliminated in the current period. And we know that the life cycle of refrigerant gases which are going to be used, life has shown us that what we think at one time that what at one time is at one time a process of accumulation which is placed in cylinders, and the process which we have found conclusive means of terminating is not terminated, and we continue to see these gases coming up for destruction and quickly outstrip our capacity to destroy them because this capacity is based on the performance of the cement factory, which we have to keep moving. And so we need to continue to transfer the technology to other cement plants, and the response which we received was no. We're not concentrating on this topic of destruction. This was the answer that the fund gave us when we went back to them to obtain more funds. So we wish to thank all those who expressed this very strong support for the proposal. We think this is a key topic, and it should be a theme, not a CRP. And we could try to determine what kind of support, what kind of discussion we have, and we would like to have a CRP, a draft that could be submitted with a series of measures to be taken in the framework of 147-2, and if necessary, we could develop a contact group in order to speed up this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cuba. One moment. Thank you very much, Cuba, for your responses. We will wait for the CRP that you have indicated you will submit, and then once that is posted, we'll ask you to introduce it into plenary, and then we will consider a contact group on that basis. I would urge you to take into account the views that you have heard from the many parties that have spoken here this morning on this issue in constructing that CRP. So that is our proposed way forward. And unless I see any objection, we will proceed to the next agenda item. No? That's the way we will proceed. So thank you very much. Chantal, over to you for agenda item 4B. Chantel.
Thank you, Annie. We will now consider agenda item 4B on metered dose inhalers with low global warming potential propellants. In decision 36/6, MOP 36 requested the TEEP to continue to provide updated information on low GWP MDIs in its annual progress reports. We have heard the TEEP's presentation on the issue. In the same decision, MOP 36 invited parties that produce MDIs to submit on a voluntary basis by June 2025, or when it becomes available, any relevant information on progress in the development of MDI products using lower GWP propellants, on the availability of other alternatives, and on the implementation of lessons learned during previous MDI propellant transitions. So far, the Secretariat has received a submission from the EU, its member states, another from the United States of America. We thank these parties for making those submissions. TEEP will consider this information, any other further submissions from parties in its 2026 quadrennial assessment report as well. All of the references are listed on the slide that is projected. Considering this information, the floor is now open for a discussion on this sub-item. Delegates may wish to make general statements and interventions. So I open the floor for statements and interventions on the issue of MDIs with low GWP propellants. The floor is open. So far, we have a request from the floor from the EU. EU, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We would like to thank TEEP once again for the additional data that was provided. It was very comprehensive and very useful on this topic, and it clearly shows that there is a lot going on. The phase out of highly climate harming propellants in MDIs is both necessary and achievable. The HFCs we use in the current inhalers, they have a global warming potential that is thousands of times higher than CO2, and which significantly contributes to climate change. There are, however, alternatives with a much lower climate impact available or are in development. Transitioning to these is a challenge, but it is one worth taking for the sake of the climate and public health. We also see a responsibility for the pharmaceutical industry to contribute to climate action, and political support is key to drive this change forward together. We would especially highlight the relevance of dry powder inhalers, DPIs, and their much lower environmental footprint in this context. It completely avoids the use of fluorinated propellants. As we read in the TIAB report, the safety and efficacy are similar for DPIs and MDIs. There are trends in several countries of switching increasingly to DPIs. In some EU countries, but we also read in India, for instance, DPIs dominate. And we also see that some respiratory organizations and societies are recognizing these environmental aspects, as we read in the TIAB report. There's new ways of treatment, combination treatments that use several agents that may be beneficial for the climate and where DPIs are frequently used. We have made, as pointed out initially by the co-chair, submission by the June deadline, and we will keep updating and sending updating information on this topic as requested by or invited by the decision that we took last year. We see, and that's confirmed again by the TIAB progress report, that there is significant progress on the introduction of a low global warming potential propellant. There are now 9 companies worldwide that the TIAP is aware of. There is an approval for a new inhaler that has been granted in the UK. In the EU, we have approval processes that are ongoing, and there are such products that may reach the market in 2025 still. TIAP also speaks of approval process in China. Also, we read that progress in 5 countries are being made. The TIAP quotes India, Bangladesh, and Latin America that low GWP propellant inhalers are being developed. There are challenges, and this makes it even more important that coordination between national environmental and health authorities takes place, and that awareness is raised, as was part of the discussions last year and is also reflected to a degree in the decision we took. It is clear that regulatory approval is a precondition for the introduction in the market of these inhalers, so these should take place in order to enable a smooth transition. In the EU, our medical agency issued guidance for the relevant companies and specifies lower requirement than for completely new medicines, where they can profit also from existing applications on safety requirements. So from the decision we took last year, there is a path forward. We will be revisiting this issue by 2027 at the latest, in the light of updated information. We will also to get continual updates from the TIAP in the progress report, and as we were very happy to get all this information this year, this will surely be very informative also the next time around. So that being said, we would also be very happy to continue speaking with others on this topic at this meeting in whatever way, if there is such an interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, EU. I see Tunisia. Tunisia, you have the floor.
شكرا سيدة رئيس المشاركة.
Thank you so much, Madam Co-Chair. As this is the first time that I take the floor, my delegation would like to thank and pay tribute to the government of Thailand for the outstanding welcome we have enjoyed. I'd also like to thank the TEEP for having prepared this report, including on inhalers. Now, scientific studies in this field haven't really come up with a clear and transparent answer when it comes to finding alternatives to these inhalers, alternatives which are more sparing in terms of climate change. Now, we have 2 factories active in this field, and we are using an increasing amount of these substances. And this means that we will soon find ourselves in a situation of non-compliance with our obligations. This is very important because it impacts human health, and it makes it very difficult to reduce both the manufacture and the consumption and use of these substances. And this is why we call for us to find alternatives to these substances as rapidly as is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Tunisia. I am not seeing any other, here we go. Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Co-Chair. Now, the issue of the use of HFUs 134A for medical inhalers is a very important one in our view. We are facing a choice. What is more important, damaging the environment or damaging health? Dr. Woodcock told us that this substance is mostly used in the fabrication of inhalers with albuterol. It's inhaled using these inhalers. It's inhaled into the lungs. And not all patients who over many years use these inhalers can use alternatives. We don't want to be in a situation where we have to make a choice between damaging the environment and damaging the health of patients. In our view, there is no alternative here. Things are quite clear. The health of individuals is simply more important. So we have to note that the use of these substances in such insignificant volumes means that even if we do come up with alternatives, in any case, forcing patients to reject these substances in the future is something that we simply cannot do. Now, if some states choose to regulate this field and force all patients to use dry powder inhalers, then of course that is their prerogative. But you cannot force all countries to do this. This is why we believe that this is a very important topic, one that can be discussed, but things have to remain voluntary. There can be no forced transition to alternatives to HFCs 134. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from the Russian Federation, and I'll give the floor to Bangladesh.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I would like to thank the delegate from Russia. As he said, the MDA sector cannot be prioritized currently. Regarding climate change, we must take action to reduce emission. But under the Kigali Amendment, we have several large sector which can be from which we can achieve our target. So, considering the health issue, we cannot compromise with the health issue because though there is some alternative, but it is not available. And for Bangladesh position, we are not in the position. We are not in a position to transform instantly in the primary. Sorry, we cannot consider primarily in the MDS sector. My Bangladesh position is to Bangladesh position is to consider the other sector, which are like REC sector. We have REC sector which consume lot of the HFC chemicals. So MDA cannot be our priority. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Bangladesh. I now see Cuba asking for the floor and Argentina. So if there are any other delegates that would like to make a contribution on this issue, I'd ask you to please indicate now, because we will be seeking to close the list and propose a way forward. So at this time, we have Cuba, Argentina, and the United States. Cuba, you have the floor.
Thank you for giving us the floor. We wish to state that pharmaceutical products are of great importance. We have been manufacturing medication for the use of our population, and we use metered dose inhalers with propellants, and this at the same time that we are great supporters of the Montreal Protocol, and nevertheless there's the use of the subbutanol propellants, and which is of great importance in our country. And this project will acquire support in order to develop alternatives to this, because our country consumes 30% of HFCs in medical products, and so we will need some help. And we are looking for alternatives. But one of the major concerns that we've had, and which have been putting forward for many years, is what will be and when will the alternatives come. This needs to be worked and tested and tried so that the HFCs can be replaced in the pharmaceutical industries, because the products that they support are of great use in our society. Thank you.
Argentina, United States, and India. We will close the list with India. Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you, Madam Co-President. I would like to thank the European Union for its intervention, but some doubts have come to my mind, because the alternative that we have at present, we're talking about dry powder systems, but in a transition from the HFCs, the problem was that the dry powder propelled inhalers were and then reconverted to the old system, and so we believe that we should look into the public presentation of this, but we should wait for the presentation of these alternatives. The last presentation was made by the OECD concerning PFAs, but we should look at the potential of a use of low pollution, low contamination substances that might be usable. And I would like to ask the European Union what alternatives they're going to opt for, because the dry powder was used in the previous transition. And so what is going to be available in the coming period, which is not in the list of PFEs? And so we're discussing, as different delegations have said, we're dealing with a public health issue of the dimension, and we have a fairly large proportion of our population in Argentina which depends on this type of medication. Thank you.
Distinguished delegate of Argentina, I now give the floor to the United States.
Thanks very much, and we, like other parties, agree that this is an important topic, but a topic for which, under the rubric of a phase down, as established by Kigali, countries can make their own decisions as to when and in what order they're choosing to move forward with transition. We believe that MDI transition is one of the most, if not the most difficult transitions that there will be for moving to alternatives. It's very much a patient-doctor centric issue, and it is paramount that we continue to recognize the importance of patient-doctor communication in this transition. We are aware that many companies are looking at alternatives and in the process of working on innovative transitions. However, this process takes time, and we're very cognizant of the need for that time for this to occur. The CFC transition for MDIs was one of the, if not the most costly, certainly one of the most costly transitions. And we are very cognizant in our own country of wanting to make some important decisions to ensure that patient health remains the key issue that we focus on as we are looking at these alternatives and engage with our health ministry at home as well. So while we recognize that there is quite a bit of work going on alternatives, we do not think this is necessarily an issue that is ripe for more discussion at this meeting. We do note that the United States was one of, I think the Secretary had said, 2 parties that did provide information on MDIs for consideration. So perhaps there's a need for some time and additional information on other parties before we're able to have a full discussion on this topic. Thanks.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from the United States, and I'll give the floor to India.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. MDI is an important sector in the HFC phase down and of importance to India, since there are 8 MDI manufacturers in the country, out of which 4 to 5 large enterprises also export MDIs to other countries. During the CFC phase out, Indian MDI successfully transitioned to HFA based alternatives through a project funded by the MLF. Just to clarify from yesterday, India does produce HFC 134A pharma grade, and MDI is an important sector and needs careful consideration in the context of HFC phase down. The national processes, frameworks in place for trials and approval of the formulation with proposed low global warming potential alternatives needs careful consideration, since the proposed alternatives will need to be matured for initiating clinical trials and approval processes. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from India. I now turn to the EU to query whether you have any reflections on the question posed by the Argentinian delegation. EU, you have the floor.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. In response, we would like to say that we find ourselves in a good position compared to the alternatives, because there's a number of options that we can be using. One of them to replace R134A and also R227E, actually the two inhalers that use highly global warming potential propellants. For many of the uses, DPI is a good choice, and that's something we read in the TIAP report, and happy if the TIAP wants to confirm that, possibly also bilaterally to Argentina. The other thing is that not both of the options are PFAS either. So one of the two options, R152A, is not a PFAS. We did have a little discussion yesterday that there might be impurities that are PFAS. We learned that yesterday actually, but those are de minimis impurities, so that would certainly not be affected by any future regulation if that should be a concern. And on the other, as we've said, the legislation at the moment is in the state of development, and critical uses will, in all likelihood, benefit from an exemption. So there's a number of options on the table. PFAS only could potentially be relevant for the one HFO solution that is being developed. Since I have the floor, I just wanted to say that we certainly recognize that that countries can make their own choice in what they prioritize in the phase down. But as we've also heard that for some countries, and I just heard it from the distinguished delegate from Cuba, the MDI sector is a very relevant sector of their HFC consumption. So it is for them important to address this sector, because otherwise they will have difficulties also meeting their consumption phase down needs. But it is in the end a decision of the country how they want to meet the obligations they have under the Montreal Protocol. We fully recognize that, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from the EU. We'll just ask for one moment to confer with the co-chair. Okay, thank you for your patience.
شكرا على صبركم. كما ذكرت من قبل فإن القائمة قد أقفلت، ولكنني أرى أن ممثلا لسوتو قد طلب الكلمة. سأسمح لليسوتو.
Lesotho, you have the floor.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, just taking the floor on this issue on MDI. The understanding is that for most of the issues or all issues, when we implement or when we want to make sure that we implement the Montreal Protocol, we work as a team. Maybe it is my first time to have the concern of some parties that point that it depends on what each party is doing. But the belief is that if we really need to make sure that we fully implement our arrangement or our decisions under the Montreal Protocol, we have to work as a team. Therefore, I do support the other countries that need these decisions to be discussed further, not saying that it should be the issue of the country, it should be the issue of the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Lesotho. So hearing all of the interventions made on the floor on this issue and noting that the EU has indicated that they are prepared to have further discussions at a later date, I would like to just thank all parties for their interventions and their reflections on this issue, and to note that the issue or the interventions made by parties will be included in the report. So we will not move forward with a contact group or informal discussions on the issue at this time, but document the interventions made in the report. And I propose that we now close this agenda item. That is the proposal from the chair. If that is acceptable to parties, we will move to the next agenda item. I'm seeing no objections from parties, so thank you. Thank you for this, and I hand over the floor to Annie for agenda item 4C.
Thank you very much, Chantel. So now we come to agenda item 4C on options for the organisation of the Technology and Economic Assessment Panel and its TOCs. In decision 35/20 taken at MOP 35 in 2023, the parties requested the panel to provide options related to the organisation of the TEEP and its TOCs. Yesterday we heard a lot of questions and also the response to the TEEP, to the request from parties. And this morning we also heard some answers to specific questions from the TEEP. The full report of the TEEP on this matter is laid out in Chapter 8 of the TEEP progress report and also summarised by the Secretariat in its addendum. Before I open the floor for discussion, I note that no organisational changes being proposed by the TEEP until 2027, when they have completed their quadrennial assessment report. So parties could take a decision on reorganisation either this year or next year. We do note, though, that next year is likely to be quite busy with replenishment negotiations, and I would urge parties to consider possibly taking a decision this year if they can, but it would be related to a forward configuration of the TEEP in 2027. So now I open the floor for observations, comments or requests further to the questions that have been posed to the TEEP. Floor is open. Thank you, Norway. If we were in Montreal, I would say thank you for breaking the ice, but there's no ice here in Bangkok, except perhaps in our drinks. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We would like once again to acknowledge the great efforts of the TIP in figuring out ways of organizing their work. Our efforts and progress under the Montreal Protocol rely on appropriate expertise and availability of experts. And we believe it is of utmost importance to provide the best environment for the TIP and its TOC to undertake their work. And for us, there are two issues that merit due consideration when discussing the options and challenges highlighted by the TIP. As both Article 5 and non-Article 5 parties are progressing in transitioning to zero ODP, low GWP substances and technologies, we see a greater amount of cross-cutting issues to be addressed, adding complexity to the work of the experts. And for the time being, we believe it is important to retain a structure that allows the TIP and its TOCs to address the many cross-cutting issues in the most efficient way. We also took note of the concern provided by the TIP regarding the challenges in keeping or recruiting experts. And we believe that an organization of the larger TOCs in subcommittees would provide an advantage for the TIP to make the best use of the available experts, rather than struggling finding new experts that could cover many topics. We also took note of the challenges mentioned by the TIP, that more and more experts from non-Article 5 countries struggle having sufficient financial resources to be able to participate in TOCs meetings. And we would be interested in getting some information from the Secretariat on the current practice of providing financial support to experts from Article 5 countries, and what it could entail if non-Article 5 experts were to also benefit from such financial support. We recognize that the TIP and the parties have done efforts in a positive direction to increase the participation from Article 5 experts, and we think it would be unfortunate if the participation of non-A5 experts would decrease because of lack of financial resources. And we might need to look at this issue in a more holistic manner. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Norway. I have 4 countries on my list now. That is India, United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, and China, and the EU. Oh, and Canada. You guys are just playing with me now. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. With reference to this agenda point, Madam, India would like to submit that the nomination process, especially for the technical option committees and the task force, should follow full consultation and endorsement by the concerned government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, India, for that very brief and concise intervention. I turn now to the United States.
Thanks very much, Madam Co-Chair. And perhaps just to start, we appreciate the work of the TEEP and its talks and how important that work is to this body and to our decisional process. We feel that the TEEP has been able to provide us with important information over many years, and we hope that that continues into the future. We also recognize a number of points that the TEEP itself made, including difficulty with recruiting new members, that it has nearly 100 or over 150 members at this time, and that it is often difficult for travel and other things that are necessary to ensure the members are able to participate in an equitable manner. We are also concerned that at least 2 of the TEEPs are, 2 of the talks are quite large. And if we were to look at how that relates to the overall use of controlled substances, they are without a doubt the most involved in terms of the information they provide covers the vast majority of uses of controlled substances under this body, a disproportionate amount, in fact. So from our perspective, we appreciate all of the options that the TEEP provided in terms of reorganization. We also appreciated the clarification they provided that all of the options are options. They were not suggesting any option had more priority over another, and in fact confirmed that there may be other options that they did not think of at the time of drafting the paper, and thus there may be other options out there. So while we appreciate the co-chair's guidance and suggestion that we try and reach a decision this year, we would like to make sure that we are thoughtful in this process. And perhaps as a first step, we would encourage that the co-chairs consider if a time can be provided for parties that are interested to ask questions of the co-chairs of the TEEP and to perhaps continue the discussion so that we are able to better understand what are the emerging needs that they have. We also note that we are concerned that as those numbers grow, if they were to grow in the future under some of the options put forward, it would be difficult to find members that are able to participate and would be able to participate fully in many of the different areas. We recognize that in some cases, and we heard this morning from one of the TEEP co-chairs who is acting as a TALK co-chair at this time, that the diversity of issues that, for example, the MC talk takes up, which we could think of the MC talk as the talk where any issue that doesn't fit anywhere else, that's where it goes. So while medical and chemical are in its title, it is covering a broad range of issues, and while they did indicate they found a way to operate, we also recognize that the concerns that we just discussed in a previous agenda item, for example, on metered dose inhalers, is quite different than many of the other issues such as feedstock emissions or other kinds of things like MPB or pathways for reduction that talk takes up as well. So we are very interested in thinking fully about that, as well as thinking about emerging issues that perhaps are important to the MC talk as well. So we would be very appreciative if the Secretariat and the co-chairs could find a time for a discussion to happen with a room so that it is clear that we can consult fully and openly with other parties as well as with the TEEP co-chairs. We also understand this may be a very busy meeting, and if you're not able to do that, we'll certainly engage in the margins. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United States, for proposing a way forward. We lost our list. So could I ask the European Union and Canada to press your buttons again? So I now have a revised order, unfortunately, for delegations. So the new order is Australia, China, UK, Canada, and the EU. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. As always, Australia would like to place on record our deep appreciation to the TEEP and its TOCs for all their hard work over many years in providing advice and information updates to the parties to assist us with oversight and implementation of Montreal Protocol obligations. This advice and information is invaluable and relied on by parties, the ExCom, consultants, and enterprises in understanding trends and challenges in transitioning to alternatives. It is incumbent on parties, in our view, to support the TEEP so it can continue to provide this service to us and the wider community. Australia thanks the TEEP for laying out options to its restructure, so the challenges it is facing and the suggested timeline for restructure coming into effect are clear. The priority issues for Australia are the operation of the RTOC and the MC-TOC, which appear to be overstretched in their current configurations. We appreciate also the difficulties caused by senior experts on the TEEP, having senior experts on the TEEP who are also members of a TOC. And we note also the proposal to reduce the number of senior experts and for remaining senior experts not to be members of a TOC at the same time. When we look at the options available, at this time our preference is for the approach of having subcommittees within both the RTOC and the MACTOC to continue to allow information flows across both subcommittees and for them to work together in areas of joint interest. We also, as has been noted by both Norway and the US, the issues around funding and membership, particularly for support for non-A5 experts who are participating and would be interested in further discussions about how we can better address the funding issues to ensure ongoing participation of experts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Australia. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, my delegation would like to express its sincere gratitude to TIP and its talks. Throughout the years, TIP, through its expertise and its in-depth economic and technical evaluation, provided the information to the parties on alternatives to controlled substances, which played a key role to helping the parties make decisions and implement the protocol. We support the options proposed by TIP to optimize its configuration. In terms of the configuration of the expert groups, we propose that the proportion of A5 countries should be considered. We should also give consideration to the geographical and gender balance. And in closing, we would like to work together with all parties to continue the discussion to deal with the current and emerging challenges and propose the most appropriate solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, China, for those observations. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. The United Kingdom would like to thank the TEEP for its clear and comprehensive presentation of the issues at hand, as well as for outlining potential options for the future organization of the talks. We believe that it's essential to give due consideration to the advice of the experts in this matter. The UK supports a restructuring approach that ensures the talks remain of manageable size, facilitates effective and efficient coordination across interlinked policy areas, and is well aligned with the implementation needs of the Kigali Amendment. We'd welcome discussions on whether the MC talk could benefit from being divided into two distinct talks to better reflect the differing challenges and specialized expertise required for the transition away from HFCs in the medical and chemical sectors. Similarly, we would welcome discussions on the establishment of two subcommittees within the refrigeration talk, recognizing the distinct and technical and policy challenges associated with cold chain applications and comfort cooling, while preserving the ability for cross-cutting collaboration among experts. We'd also like to echo others' concerns about the funding of non-A5 TEEP members and would welcome this matter being explored further by parties and the Secretariat. Separately, we've also noted from previous discussions in the Q&A that limiting the size of the MB talk may diminish expertise required to engage on the issue of N2O. While we appreciate this is not within the current scope of the protocol, we recognize that it's a known ozone-depleting substance, and there's growing interest among some parties to have further discussions on the issue. To conclude, we'd value further discussion and clarity from the TEEP on retaining this expertise, as well as the issues of reorganizing the MC and RTOCs and the funding challenges for non-A5 TEEP members in a contact group.
Thank you very much, United Kingdom. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and we also would like to thank the TEEP for the preparation of its report on the organization of the panel and its Technical Options Committee. It contains a lot of useful historical background on the evolution and of the mandates and the configuration of these bodies, which are essential to the continuing development and implementation of the Montreal Protocol. And I think Australia put it quite eloquently in terms of, the fundamental role that the TEEP provides to this protocol in terms of the advice and information that is continually requested and provided to the parties. And I think, we can't emphasize enough our appreciation to the TEEP and the talks for their work. We're generally satisfied with the report prepared by the working group of the TEEP on the organization. We believe that the options prepared for future configuration of each talk are sensible and provide a good basis for parties to start discussing this issue and consider whether to make any changes to the structure, size, and focus of the talks. Coming to this meeting, looking at the organization and the options proposed, at least for the F-Talk, FS-Talk, MC-Talk, and R-Talk, we had a preference for the option 1 that was being proposed in this case. However, this was, partly based on the fact that what we had seen in the report was that in each case there was a preference for option 1 by the talk, but I think that what we heard today and yesterday was that in perhaps considering this issue further, the TEEP is now saying that there's not necessarily a preference between option 1 and option 2. So I guess we're going to want to sort of rethink a little bit how we came to this, because our general approach was if the TEEP prefers to do it this way and there's pros and cons in each case, then we sort of balance towards what seemed to be their preference. But if that's not necessarily their preference, then I think that we want to stay open to the different options. Still, we don't foresee for these talks major changes in membership size or sort of priorities or mandate at this point. I guess the one exception would be the MB talk. Well, we'll see this. We think there is more justified reason for somewhat a reduced membership, given that we phased out control use of methylbromide, including critical uses now. So really the only enduring use of the substance is for quarantine and pre-shipment application, which are exempted for control. So keeping the same level of committee size for use, which is not actually controlled, perhaps is not appropriate. And I don't think it would necessarily provide the impression that it's not important to reduce methylbromide from QPS. I think we have a lot of decisions that encourages parties to move towards alternatives in QPS applications. We expect this issue is going to keep coming up and that the MEP talk will be there to provide more information. But it just seemed to us that if that's going to be sort of the main area, then perhaps there is some room for reduction there. There's a lot of detail related to each of talks and to this issue, so I think we would also welcome a contact group or an informal group to start discussing these issues among parties, but also very important to have the TEEP co-chairs there because we have a number of questions, not only with respect to the options that they're proposing for the talks, but also we see that there's also a proposal for a kind of standing working group of the replenishment task force. So we had some questions a little bit about that. Yeah, so thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Canada, for those observations. So I have 3 countries on my list at the moment. That's EU, Kenya, and Pakistan, and Japan. I obviously can't count. I would like to close the list at the end of the EU intervention. So if you are intending to make an intervention on this issue, please ensure that you press the button and put yourself on the list by the end of the EU intervention. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. From the side of the EU, we certainly want to repeat all the kind but well-deserved words towards TIAP for their work in general. We do agree that they are a source of information that we need to be able to make good decisions and to make progress in our protocol. And we do recognize that they actually have a lot of work and a lot of tasks. So making sure they can do so and function in an appropriate setting is important to make sure that they are effective. In that context, we really welcome this report, the progress report. We think it's detailed, it goes in substance, it replies on questions asked in decision 3520. In their report, we note their request to continue functioning in their current setting for notably the work related to the ongoing quadrennial assessment report. And on that issue, the EU would be positive towards that request. But for future work beyond the current quadrennial assessment report, we note that indeed different options are proposed for the different technical option committees. We note that at least when we were reading the report and when we were looking at the individual chapters discussing the separate talks, that preferences were expressed. When reading the report, in general, the EU could, well, in a way, find itself in the kind of preferences indicated. We saw logic to it. I don't want to repeat all the words by the Norwegian delegation, but I do think they raised the issue about complexity and sometimes needing cross-fertilization across different types of expertise. Actually, if we go back to the progress report of 2 years ago, for RTOC, I think at that time they made a very good summary of the kind of technical expertise that is of use across the RTOC, but also the kind of expertise that is of use in their subcommittee structure, looking at different use cases. So I found that also a good source of information. So it seems that for some topics, very focused talks might be the way forward, and for some other topics, we could allow for a more diversified setting and a different work structure focused on subcommittees. We would think that indeed this meeting offers an opportunity to continue the exchange on this with other parties to see what are the pros and cons of different options. And I think a number of pros and cons were already offered. Just to say that from the side of the EU, if it's for MB talk, we do note that there is still significant use of metal bromide, and at least we think it's worthwhile that we keep being informed on what are the remaining uses and emissions, associated emissions, and how notably the emissions can be further decreased. And there, I think we see certainly its purpose on continuing being informed and therefore having a representative talk with sufficient expertise present. I think what is important also is if we meet, it could allow us to start reflecting on what kind of decision we need. There could be, I think, a number of options on how to address that. Finally, but I think it's been expressed already, if we have the opportunity to discuss this among parties, we would of course like to have TIA present, including the TOC co-chairs, if possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, European Union. So no other countries have requested the floor, so the list is now closed. The next speaker on my list is Kenya.
Hello. Sorry. So it was on. I thought it was going to be green. Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. Kenya noted the challenges faced by TIP and further noted the low membership from the African region, which raised some concerns. As the TIP is the one feeling the pinch of work, Kenya would support options that are preferred by the TIP so long as the options are in line with the TIP TORs, the terms of reference. Kenya supports a balanced regional representation in addition to the need for experts with relevant specialist knowledge and experience to the technology and economic assessment panel and its technical option committees. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kenya. The last two parties on my list are Pakistan and Japan. Pakistan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Co-Chair. Pakistan appreciates the valuable work of TEEP and its TOCs in providing objective, high-quality technical guidance to parties over the years. Their contributions remain central to the success of the Montreal Protocol. We believe future arrangements should include structured pathways for junior experts, especially from Article 5 and high ambient temperature countries, Group 2 countries. Mentorship and succession planning will ensure regional diversity, intergenerational learning, and long-term sustainability of TEEP's work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pakistan, for that observation. And finally, Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Japan would like to, first of all, to express its deep appreciation to the TEEP and its Technical Option Committee. Their work, we believe, that is of fundamental importance to the success of the Montreal Protocol, and we are truly grateful for their continued dedication and expertise. Regarding the reorganization of TEEP, particularly in relation to the larger talks, Japan had considered the suggested options. If we were to express preference based solely on the current proposals, we believe that option 1 is a favorable choice for both the R-Talk and MC Talk. Maintaining the current organizational structure of these committees allow for effective engagement on cross-cutting issues through subcommittees. And we have believed that this approach helps avoid duplication of discussions and enables all experts within the committees to collaborate efficiently, ensuring timely and responsive support to the parties. That said, as the US and others have rightly pointed out, this issue requires a careful and thorough consideration to fully understand its implications, and we therefore welcome further substantive discussions, and we remain open to any dialogue that explores all potential possibilities and options, duly taking account all the challenges and problems that we faced, which were mentioned in the TEEP report, when considering the future structure of TEEP and its organization of TEEP and its talks. So we are ready to engage also in any further discussion that will happen at this margin or in any contact report, informal discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Japan. We have come to the list, the end of the list of speakers. I recall actually that Norway had posed a question to the Secretariat in relation to the current practice of funding experts. Can I turn to the Secretariat to provide some guidance? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. The current practice of the Secretariat, which is based on the budget decisions adopted by MOP, is to fund A5 experts based on the Montreal Protocol Trust Fund. And when it comes to non-A5 experts, there is limited funding for a few non-A5 experts that is taken from donor funding that we are authorized to use for that purpose. On a per capita basis, Norway was asking what is involved if we were to think of also funding non-A5 experts. First of all, we would need authorization from the meeting of the parties in a decision, because the budget decisions only encourage parties to support non-A5 experts. So we would need a MOP decision, and in terms of cost, the per capita cost of travel of experts is about $4,000, and so we'd have to think then how many experts are we talking about and how many meetings per year are we talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ozone Secretariat. One moment. Thank you very much. We have listened very closely to the many interventions that have been made. Many of them provided some very thoughtful responses to the recommendations made by the TEEP, and also made some additional comments as well in relation to TEEP organisation, structure, experts, etc. So we propose as a way forward, given that there is no CRP at this stage, we propose an informal group would meet together with the TEEP, members of the TEEP, including the TOC co-chairs, in the margins of the meeting to have further in-depth discussions and to try and identify a potential way forward, maybe this year, maybe next year, but anyway, we will see what the result of those informal discussions will be. We have identified some conveners for an informal group. That would be Alessandro Peru of Italy and Leslie Smith from Grenada. And we will get back to you on a time and location for such an informal group. So if there are no objections to that way forward, we will proceed in that manner. Thank you very much for your acquiescence to that proposal. So I now turn to Chantel to start us off with agenda item 4D. Chantel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Annie. So we move to agenda item 4D on any other issues. The purpose of this agenda item is to allow parties to raise any issues from the TEEP's progress report that they believe are important and that may not be adequately covered under other sub-items. At the time of the adoption of the agenda, we agreed to include the following matters for discussion under this agenda item. Sub-item A, panel membership changes, HALON 1301, as well as fire suppressants overall generally, VSLS, and PFAS. We propose to take each of these items in sequence. So we move to the discussion on panel membership changes. Table 2 of the addendum to the note by the Secretariat, document 47/2/1, lists TEEP members whose terms expire at the end of 2025 and whose reappointment requires a decision by MOP 37. There are also members of the TOCs whose terms expire at the end of the year, but their reappointment does not require a MOP decision. With regard to the nominations for the 5 TEEP positions, no nominations have been received to date. I note that nominating parties usually wait until the time of the MOP to submit their nominations. The Secretariat will post the nominations in the meeting portal as they come in between now and MOP 37. I therefore would like to suggest that interested parties consult each other and also the TEEP informally in the margins of this meeting, with a view to deciding on the nominations at MOP 37 later in this year, and I propose that the agenda item would be closed thereafter. The discussions would continue at MOP 37. I hope that the suggested way forward is agreeable to the delegates. At this time, however, I would open the floor for any comments or discussions, interventions from parties. Okay, seeing no requests from the floor, let us move to the next agenda item. HALON 1301. I'm seeing, okay. Okay. Australia, you're asking for the floor, as well as the United Kingdom. So Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I might have jumped in a little bit quickly there. Apologies. So I think, as we indicated in our intervention on the adoption of the agenda, we think this is definitely an issue worth consideration. And we thank the FSTOC for the information provided in the progress report. And we'd also like to thank the FSTOC co-chairs for their useful responses to the questions put to them by delegations yesterday in the question and answer session. We note the concerns of the FSTOC about the impacts of, I guess, the uncertainty around regulation of alternatives to Halon 1301 that arises from proposed regulatory actions on those alternatives because of the fact they meet the definition of PFAS in some economies. As previously mentioned, and as confirmed by the FSTOC co-chairs yesterday in response to questions, the new type approvals of aircraft, if allowed to continue to use Halon 1301 in cargo compartments, will likely extend the use of Halon 1301 in this situation for at least another 50 years. And while it was confirmed that short-term availability of 1301 is not a particular issue, it will obviously have potential impacts on long-term supply. We also note from an Australian perspective in the domestic context that we expect sustained demand for halons for use in aviation and in military applications, including on new platforms. We note also the upcoming International Civil Aviation Authority General Assembly meeting in September that may contemplate a decision on extending the use of Halon 1301 in these new aircraft designs from the current 2024 deadline on the basis of aviation industry representations. In response to these issues, we have been working with some other delegations on a draft CRP, and at this time it's not finalised. We'll keep the co-chairs updated on progress towards submitting that, so the issue can be discussed further, hopefully in a contact group. But to briefly, I guess, describe the things that we are considering including is to say that there would be a decision, there would be a draft decision as part of this CRP, which goes to a number of the issues that the TEEP kind of raised in its report, which is to examine some of the to continue to engage with the relevant technical committees on the use of halons in civil aviation, and to also report on halon availability based on assessment of activities in that area, to encourage parties to liaise with their civil aviation authorities to understand better how halons and their alternatives are being used, and to, I guess, address other concerns around the ongoing use. There would also be some background information on kind of the situation provided as part of the CRP, largely because we want to ensure that parties or delegations have a good understanding of the situation, noting that the decision or the meeting of the General Assembly of the International Civil Aviation Organisation will occur in September, where this issue might be considered, and that would occur ahead of any decision able to be taken by a meeting of the parties. So we think it's important that delegations engage on this issue prior to any decision of the parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Australia, for that intervention and for keeping me on my toes by jumping the gun. For the morning, I've been waiting for persons to intervene. So thank you for getting us started. I now give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So the UK would like to thank the FSTOC for bringing this important issue of Halon 1301 to the attention of the parties. So the UK recognises the governance complexities involved, particularly in light of the upcoming ICAO General Assembly, which will take place prior to the 37th meeting of the parties. So in this context, the UK would welcome efforts that promote enhanced coordination between the ICAO and the Montreal Protocol, given the cross-cutting nature of this matter. And we would like to thank the distinguished delegate from Australia for leading on this proposed CRP. In addition, we believe it would be valuable to explore the request for the TEEP through its Fire Suppression Technical Options Committee to undertake an assessment on global halon availability and to report on the status of existing halon banks. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. I have Canada, EU, Switzerland, Norway, and the United States on my list. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And Canada would also like to thank the TEEP and the Fire Suppression Technical Options Committee for the update provided on halons and fire suppression in the progress report, and particularly for bringing to the attention of the parties the issue of a possible request to extend the deadline set by the International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO, for replacing Halon 1301 in new aircraft designs. Canada understands that this is a time-sensitive issue as consideration to extend the 2024 deadline for use in Halon in cargo compartments in new aircraft designs could take place as early as the upcoming 42nd General Assembly of the ICAO at the end of September of this year. Which means, as Australia indicated, that any decision that could be taken on this matter by parties to the Montreal Protocol would be too late to have an impact on this issue at the ICAO meeting taking place in a couple of months. As indicated by the FS talk, a decision to extend the deadline for the use of Halon 1301 in new aircraft designs could mean that a requirement for Halon 1301 could continue for at least an additional 50 years and beyond. This would almost inevitably require the production of new Halon 1301 at some stage, and hence consideration of one or more essential use exemption. Given that Halon production was completely phased out in non-Article 5 parties almost 30 years ago, and in 2008 in Article 5 countries, and that Halon 1301 has the highest ODP of the substances controlled by the Montreal Protocol, it would be something of a setback for this agreement if we started having new production of this substance. This is a situation that ideally we would want to avoid, albeit we understand that depending on the developments over the next few years, it is something that could become necessary at some point in time. We are aware that since the FS Talk report was published, the International Coordination Council of Aerospace Industry Associations has indeed developed a working paper at the upcoming, for the upcoming ICAO General Assembly, requesting an extension of the use of Halon 1301 in cargo compartments of new aircraft designs until 2035, and requesting also collaboration with the Montreal Protocol on the submission of an essential use nominations for Halon. And we understand that this association is seeking support from ICAO member states to sponsor this paper. In terms of the process at the ICAO, what we understand is the association, the industry can submit a proposal, but in order for it to be discussed, it would have to be picked up by a government that is member of the ICAO. Now, the proposal is to extend the use of Halon 1301 until December 2035. So this is 11 years, or 10 years, 11 years beyond the current date. So the 50 years that the TEEP estimated in terms of continuing requirement for Halon is actually significantly higher than that if this proposal was accepted. We understand that what is driving this proposal is a genuine concern about a potential restriction on the use of the alternative to BTP due to its categorization as a PFAS in various countries, including within the European Union. 2-BTP is a key ingredient of the product Verdagent, which so far is the only alternative that's been considered for cargo compartments that has passed the minimum performance standards and is therefore considered as the only alternative with a technology readiness level to replace Halon 1301 in such applications. In that context, it's understandably perceived by the civil aviation industry that the only way to ensure safety in newly designed aircraft is to extend the 2024 deadline for the use of Halon 1301 and secure the long-term supply of this substance via an essential use exemption under the Montreal Protocol until an acceptable alternative is available. While we recognize the importance of the concerns that have been raised, it appears to this delegation that the assumption on which this concern is based, that 2-BTP will be banned or severely restricted, is perhaps questionable, and there may be some nuances about the planned regulatory developments concerning the substance that are not fully appreciated and perhaps could be clarified at this meeting. We'd have to say from Canada's case, 2-BTP is considered a PFAS according to the broad OECD definition, which is used in the Canadian government's stage of PFAS reports published in 2025. There are no current restrictions pertaining to this substance. And while risk management measures may be considered eventually to minimize human exposure to the substance, it's important to realize that in the Canadian context, risk management measures could include non-regulatory or regulatory control and in no way necessarily imply a ban on the use of the substance. We also note that as the FS stock indicated in the report and yesterday afternoon, that there is a global transition from Halon 1211 in portable fire extinguishers to 2-BTP that is almost completed within the EU and the UK, and is also happening in other countries, which makes an impending ban on this substance even more unlikely. That said, the apprehensions from stakeholders in the world of civil aviation are real and cannot be ignored, so we think it's critical for parties to discuss this issue and consider, firstly, whether in the short term the OEWG or individual parties may want to send some message to the ICAO representatives ahead of the September meeting. We know that the FS TOC, for instance, has recommended liaising with civil aviation authorities to defer until 2028 a decision on extending the 2024 deadline. Beyond such immediate actions, as we also heard from Australia, there are probably additional actions that parties could take in order to better coordinate with ICAO on this issue and to ensure the long-term availability of Halon 1301 for the civil aviation applications. And this could form the basis of our CRP. We also have been working with Australia on the CRP that they're leading at this meeting. We think that we would support the establishment of a contact group to discuss this issue. Perhaps the contact group should await the submission of a CRP. We're not sure, how to go about this. We think that it's important to start discussing this issue as soon as possible so that we have a path forward, by the end of this OEWG. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Canada. I have on my list EU, Switzerland, Norway, and the United States of America. I would like to close the list. I see New Zealand. So we'll close the list with New Zealand. EU, we have the floor. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And we agree with a lot of the things that have already been said by, in particular, Canada and Australia. Of course, we'd like to thank, first of all, the FS TOC for providing a lot of information, also alerting us to the issue with ICAO and the industry initiative at ICAO. So we are very worried that this industry proposal that is likely to be presented in September at ICAO at the General Assembly may mean, as previously stated, that Halon 1301 would be required for at least 50 years, as our technical bodies are telling us, and likely further. So, as also mentioned by the distinguished delegate from Canada, the main reason stated in this proposal by industry is that there are possible PFAS restrictions on the main alternative to BTP, in this case used as a blend with CO2. From the side of the EU, we would like to recall that there's no such restrictions are in place today, and that the PFAS restrictions that are under discussions in the EU and the proposals made, the original proposals by 5 member states, do foresee an exemption for the aviation sector. Also, any future EU restrictions on PFAS that might come in the medium term or short to medium term will in all likelihood allow for exemptions of critical applications where no alternatives are available, and thus will apply in all likelihood to fire suppression systems in civil aviation also. So in our view, 2-BTP remains as a valid alternative. The delegate from Canada also alluded to its use in the handheld fire extinguishers already. So as regards to use in the cargo compartments, a blend with CO2 of 2-BTP and CO2 has been tested and the outcome was successful. So we consider that a valid alternative that can be used. As a result, we think that the initiative by industry seems premature at this time. Since, however, there is a certain uncertainty around the availability of Halon, and our FS talk has alerted us to that it may run out in the future, but there is a large time span when exactly that will be happening. So essentially, better data would be needed on the needs of Halon and the use of it and how many stocks are remaining. So we would really like to work on this side of the issue and try to obtain better data for the TIAB and for the FS talk to better clarify what the stocks are and when a run-out date in the future will exactly happen. So narrow down the uncertainties on this. So we support, of course, a renewed coordination between the Ozone Secretariat and the ICAO, but we also want cooperation at the technical level of ICAO. And as we understand also from the FS Talk report, that there is important data that is held at the CAPE, the Committee of Aviation Environmental Protection at ICAO. So a cooperation between our bodies and the relevant bodies at ICAO are important in this context to make use of this data that is available at ICAO in order to refine the estimates that we have on our side on stocks and how long they may last. And the TIAB in their report has given us some detailed information what such data could be, and that includes, for instance, the maintenance, repair, and overhaul operations authorized to service Halons, and also data on future fleet evolutions and estimates on airplanes in operations with different types of Halon fire protection systems. So that's something we consider that would be a very useful way forward in collect more data and to help us in the medium long term to see when or if there is an issue of Halon supply running out for the use in civil aviation. Another point is that comes also from the FS talk report is that we strongly oppose the willful destruction of halons for the sake of carbon credits, which is clearly a perverse incentive. Just to note that the destruction of usable halons is illegal in the EU since March 2024. As shown by the FS talk report, there are alternatives for most remaining uses of halons. Halon levels in the EU remain stable, so avoiding virgin halons is possible by focusing on avoidance of destructions, better reclamation, transboundary movements, and other bottlenecks. We are also encouraged by the fact that globally the use of inert gases and water-based systems and other alternatives has increased. So, in conclusion, we support, of course, the work on a CRP, and we thank Australia for the leadership on this topic. We're very happy to engage further on the CRP, and we'd like to discuss the CRP in a contact group once it's been forwarded. To clarify, we are also happy to start a contact group without the CRP having been finalized. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. And now give the floor to Switzerland, followed by Norway. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. After having read the comprehensive TIP progress report, we also became utterly concerned about the prospect of a continued use of halon in the aviation industry for the next decades. Because alternatives to halon fall under the definition of PFAS in upcoming regulations, this may lead industry to the premature conclusion that the use of halon is the only way forward, possibly resulting in the submission of an essential use nomination. Therefore, liaising with national civil aviation authorities with a view to defer a decision by the ICAO on the continued use of halons appeared to us as necessary to safeguard past effort in the phasing out of ozone-depleting substances. We therefore think it is necessary now to send a strong signal from the parties of the Montreal Protocol to ICAO that reverting to halons is undermining the recovery of the ozone layer. We would therefore welcome the establishment of a contact group on this issue and would like to thank the distinguished delegate from Australia for taking the lead on the CRP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland. I now give the floor to Norway.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We would like to thank the fire suppression talk for highlighting the specific challenges in availability of halons and alternatives for all enduring uses, and for raising in particular the issue of potential extension of the use of halon 1301 in cargo compartments for new airplane design. We consider this matter with great concerns. It will be unfortunate if the Civil Aviation Organization adopts an extension of the use of this halon beyond 2024. That would imply to locking this use for more than 50 years. And we understand that extensive work has been carried out for many years to develop a suitable alternative to BTP, which has a low ODP of about 0.0028 and low GWP value of 0.25 in comparison to the high ODP value of 10 of halon 1301 with a GWP value of above 7,000. However, we understand that the civil aviation industry has concerns in using 2-BTP, as it is likely to be identified as a PFAS and potentially targeted by PFAS regulatory action in several parties. We think at this point of time it could be helpful for our discussion here within the Montreal Protocol to provide some clarification on the intent and next steps of the PFAS restriction proposal submitted in 2023 under the EU chemicals legislation, as Norway was one of the proponents. The intention of the proposal is to minimize emissions of PFAS to avoid further building up of PFAS in the environment and subsequent exposure to humans and the environment. In this context, time-limited derogations, including for the civil aviation application under discussion here, have been proposed, and are being further considered by the scientific committees of the European Chemicals Agency. The aim of such derogations is to allow for an orderly substitution process when alternatives are become available, and this without jeopardizing the availability of PFAS in the uses where they are still needed. After the submission of the proposal, a public consultation was run for 6 months, and more than 5,600 comments were submitted by stakeholders. The proposal, together with the many consultation comments, are still under evaluation in 2 scientific committees of the European Chemical Agency. One committee is the Committee for Risk Assessment, the second one is the Committee for Socioeconomic Analysis. And the draft opinion of the Socioeconomic Analysis Committee is expected to be published early in 2026 and will be subject to a public consultation that will provide another opportunity for all interested third parties to provide relevant information regarding socioeconomic aspects of the proposed restriction on PFAS to be then considered in the final opinion of the Committee for the Socioeconomic Analysis. The ultimate step will be for the European Commission to decide on the restriction in consultation with EU member states. We think it could perhaps be useful to also provide some of this clarification to ICAO and its members, for them to be able to take an informed decision at their General Assembly in September. It has already been mentioned previously that the timing of the ICAO General Assembly is a challenge, and we are interested in finding a way for the Montreal Protocol to provide any specific clarification or guidance to ICAO and its members, and we believe, for example, that much could be done by parties of the Montreal Protocol interested in reaching out to their relevant authorities at the national level. We are also interested in discussing further steps that this body can undertake in order to facilitate the work of the fire suppression TOC in providing us with updated information on the estimated availability of the halons and alternatives used as fire suppression clean agents. We are also engaged in the drafting of the CRP initiated by Australia and support further discussion in the contact group. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. And I'll give the floor to the United States, and we will close with New Zealand. United States.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. And before I start, just a note that I believe the agenda item was Halon 1301 and other fire suppression agents, not just 1301. So we'd ask the Secretariat to correct that agenda item going forward. I've listened very carefully, and our delegation has listened very carefully to this discussion and read very carefully the report. There are no.
我刚才仔细
Would start with that we recognize the importance of this body as well as ICAO, and ICAO's mission is quite important as well, which is to protect passenger safety. We would encourage parties, if they haven't done so yet, to coordinate directly with their ICAO representatives. We will also note that this is a non-decisional meeting, and as a non-decisional meeting, it is important that we keep in mind the content of this discussion and what it is that we are intending to have as an outcome from this meeting. And again, would reiterate that we, as a party to both the Montreal Protocol and ICAO, we have an opportunity to coordinate with our colleagues who work directly with ICAO. We think that there are a number of different issues that have all been blended into perhaps this amalgamation of one issue, and we think it's important to perhaps take a step back and to consider them separately. First is whether or not there's a continued need for halon, and I'm going to say continued need, because irrespective of whether or not there's a change with the 2024 date for cargo compartments and the use of halon in new type certification aircraft, halon will continue to be used in other aircraft, in other newly manufactured aircraft that fall under existing type certification. And we want to make that point explicitly because there is no ban on the use of halon. There is no prevention of the use of halon. This is about whether or not halon would be permitted to be used in new type certification aircraft. It is important that we keep in mind that distinction because halon, recovered, recycled, remanufactured, reused halon will continue to be used. So for us, the question is not about whether or not halon will be continued to be used 10, 15, 20, 30, or 50 years from now, because the existing type certification aircraft will still allow for it. It is about what would be the additional amount of halon that would be necessary for a new type certification. So we wanted to make that point as a distinguishing feature between these two parts of that issue. It's the amount of halon associated with new type certification, not whether or not halon will continue to be used. And then within that, we would have questions of the TEEP that we would like to be able to ask of the TEEP, either through a CRP or in some other way, as we did yesterday during the general discussion, about what was that amount of halon that we were talking about and how does that relate to how this would move forward. We're also very cognizant, as we all are, because I think most of us traveled to this meeting by aircraft, that we want to ensure that there is still safety associated with our ability to travel, and that we are not in a situation where planes are grounded because they do not have adequate fire suppression. That said, our view is that there are emerging alternatives that we hope are certified and can be used in the future, including 2BTP or 2PDP in combination with CO2. We are encouraged by the innovative technologists who are coming up with new alternatives and moving forward with those alternatives. But we also recognize that this is a complex issue and it requires both our look at this issue and we agree also the look of our counterparts in ICAO. With that in mind, there are a few points that we'd like to make. The Committee on Aviation and Environmental Protection, CAPE, is not necessarily the appropriate body, since that is a political body, to coordinate with the FS TOC. So we would ask that when we are drafting a decision, we are cognizant that the Air Navigation Safety Committee, or simply to refer to ICAO and its working groups, would be a more appropriate framing for this. We are a little bit worried that we seem to be almost, I want to say an English expression which may or may not translate well, my apologies, but it feels like sometimes it's apples and oranges. We are picking a political body in one group and a technical body in another. We'd also remind the parties that often the way we approach this is we request that the Secretariat liaise with the Secretariat of ICAO. Our Secretariat is who we put forth, and we ask that they liaise with the Secretariat there. And similarly, we ask our technical body, which is the TEEP through its FS TOC, to coordinate with its counterparts at ICAO. We'd ask that we are careful that that this is a non-decisional meeting, and so to the extent we keep hearing language that seems to be suggesting something else, that could be problematic. Our view is that there is an appropriate place and an opportunity for the technical information to be exchanged and for us to work at home with our counterparts on other messages that we wish to send as individual parties, as opposed to sort of trying to find a way in a non-decisional meeting to have that information conveyed. With that in mind, though, we are certainly encouraged and would like to work on a decision. But again, we'd like to separate out the issues. There's an issue about whether or not, in the absence of certified alternatives that are clear and have long-term path forward, whether or not there's a continued need for the use of halon. That is separate in our minds for whether or not, at some future date, halon or some other controlled substance would be a need in which somebody would come forward with an essential use or critical use. That's separate in our minds from whether or not recovered, recycled halon would continue to be used as it is used today in all new aircraft under existing type certifications. We appreciate the Secretariat amended the language on the agenda item, and with that in mind, we'd also like to voice concerns that we raised previously, which is that this issue really involves enduring and non-enduring uses of halon. Consistent with what the FS TOC reported, and we asked questions about this explicitly during the discussion the other day, Halon 1301, Halon 1211, Halon 2402 are being used right now in enduring and non-enduring uses. It is important they are used where other alternatives are not viable, and in this case, other clean agents are not viable. And so from this delegation's perspective, it is important that any decision that we take should consider the other controlled substances that are used as clean agents, because to the extent they can be used in enduring uses, such as the ones we mentioned the other day when we brought this question forward, it would allow for more 1301 to be used in aviation, for example, where those other alternatives are not appropriate. So, for example, if some of the uses that are where we see halon being used today could convert to other clean agents, which may be controlled substances, we would provide space for recovered recycled halon to be used and thus avoid a situation where somebody came forward and requested new production of halon. So we would also ask that as this discussion continues, it is broadened to include the other fire suppressants, particularly the controlled agents that are used as fire suppression agents, so that we are able to ensure that halon is used only where halon is needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, USA. I now invite New Zealand to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. New Zealand thanks the Government of Thailand and its people for their warm welcome, and as we come from a New Zealand winter, also the warm weather. We also thank the Secretariat for all their work preparing for this meeting, the TEEP for its progress report, and the co-chairs for your skillful guidance of our discussions. Like the speakers before us, New Zealand is also concerned by the information in the FS TOC report regarding the potential expanded use of halon 1301 in aircraft. We note in particular the high ozone depleting potential of halon 1301 and its emissive use in fire suppression systems. The ICAO General Assembly may make a decision on the expanded use of halon 1301 in September, before our next meeting of the parties. We therefore note the urgency of the issue. We would support this meeting encouraging the parties to engage with their respective civil aviation authorities on the implications of such a decision on the future supply of halon and on the Montreal Protocol. New Zealand would also support the Ozone Secretariat and the TEEP to liaise with their appropriate counterparts in the ICAO on this issue. We would be interested in further discussing this matter in a contact group. We thank Australia for taking the lead on our CRP. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. And I see that we have one more request for the floor from the Russian Federation. We'll take that request and close the list and decide on a way forward. So Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Co-Chair. Now, to ensure that we don't repeat ourselves, we would just like to say that we fully back the statement made by the delegate of the United States of America. It is clear, it is detailed, it is precise, and we would like to add that knowing as we do that we are here discussing safety, the safety of individuals, it's not entirely ethical to turn to ICAO and try to convince them that they shouldn't continue to use these products, knowing that there are no alternatives. All of us fly around the world, and we all want to do so in complete safety. And as we know, there are no alternatives to the use of halons 1301. So why should we tell ICAO that they shouldn't use them anymore if we know that there are no alternatives to them and none seem to be planned for? In our view, this would be the wrong approach. Furthermore, we need to bear in mind that that we have reduced to a minimum our use of ODSs, and the regulation of ozone depleting substances currently is done properly. And if there is use in sectors where it is absolutely essential, well, then that is simply the situation. It will continue. These substances will continue to be used in practice as there are no alternatives. So we believe that discussing this issue, preparing a CRP, and a decision, because of course a CRP always leads to a decision, is something which is simply not useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Russian Federation. So given the interventions made on the floor, we do note that there are some parties who have indicated that they are in the process of preparing a CRP. But generally there is agreement that it is an issue that should be discussed further. So what I would like to propose is that the delegations who have indicated that they are working on a CRP, that they do try to submit it as soon as possible so that they can present it to the meeting for further discussions, and then we would entertain the establishment of a group to discuss at that time. That is the proposal from the floor. So we will park this item until we see a CRP, a draft, prepared by the proponents. So at this time, I hand over to my co-chair, Annie, to take us through the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chantel. The next agenda item relates to very short-lived substances. In decision 36.4, parties were invited to provide the Secretariat with information on national measures concerning the use or of emissions of very short-lived substances on a voluntary basis by the end of March this year, and requested the Secretariat to compile a compendium of national measures based on such information. 8 submissions, including from a party with its 27 member states, were received, and the Secretariat has developed an online compendium of these submissions, which is available from its website. Since the EU requested this issue be placed on the agenda, I turn to the EU now to make the comments that it wishes to make in relation to this issue. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. So the very short-lived substances, they have been overlooked in the past somewhat, and the potential that they could reach the atmosphere was underestimated. So this is becoming now clear when we look at what we've read in the quadrennial assessment and progress reports from our technical bodies. As other sources of chlorine in the stratosphere decrease, the contribution from these substances increases. We also see an increasing amount of emissions coming from these substances. As a way of example, they are now representing 4% of the total chlorine input to the stratosphere, and future emissions of one of the substances of VSLS, the dichloromethane, have the potential to lead to more ozone depletion than emissions from other sources in many of the other alternative scenarios explored in the quadrennial report. So it is certainly an issue that is rising. Another worrying thing is the substantial increase that was, for instance, for dichloromethane again, was increasing annually by an average of 13% between 2011 and 2019. and the emissions continued to grow during the period 2020 to 2022. At the same time, there are alternatives to many of these substances for many of the emissive uses, including the uses as solvents in foam blowing and chromatography. And there are best practices to limit the use of, for instance, chlorinated solvents and reducing these emissions. So, having read that from our technical bodies, we took a decision last year to look further into this matter. And we will, of course, get some more information in the quadrennial report from the TIAP and SAP in the next year. We also took a decision to collect more data from parties. And from this party, as you stated, comprised of 27 member states, we made a detailed submission on the issue that highlights national measures, which includes legislation in a number of fields. For instance, in the field of health and safety, there are restrictions, since some of these substances are carcinogenic, some are toxic. There are rules on occupational health, exposure limits, and for product safety. There is a number of best available techniques in the use in industry and in production. There are rules on containment, avoiding emissions, and on reporting on these substances, on emissions. There are rules on labeling of products using them. And finally, of course, there are regulations on limiting emissions to air and water, such as emission ceilings. There are waste policies. As I said initially, there are a lot of ways of avoiding the emissions. We have provided in our submission some detailed information on best available technologies. We also provided voluntarily some data on use of emissions of dichloromethane, 1,2-dichloroethane, trichloroethylene, and trichloromethane. Furthermore, we provided some information on many alternatives available for a number of these uses. We have given links, and we have for dichloromethane, trichloroethylene, we have also made a list in our submission. We've seen by what the Ozone Secretariat has put on their website that 5 other parties have provided different parts of information on national legislation, data on production, use, and emissions, and best practices. So it's very valuable to have this information. We must say that this compendium was a little bit hard to find for us, but the Ozone Secretariat helped us find it. But we do need some more time to fully digest all this information that was provided. So we're very happy to present our submission even in more detail to others if there is such an interest. It might also be interesting to hear from other submitters and others that have not yet submitted and use these substances on the data that they, or information that they would bring to the table. And for this reason, we would like to propose a discussion at this meeting for this topic. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, EU. I see that I have one more delegation wishing to take the floor, but we are running up against lunchtime, and so I will hold your intervention. Are you sure you can be like 10 seconds? Okay, Canada, like I'm going to cut you off in like 30.
Thank you, EU, for raising this issue. Interesting to hear that the submissions have been posted somewhere. We didn't realize that, so would be good to make that clear for all parties. I think we're interested to discuss, the issue. We know that this is going to come back with a 2026 assessment, but if there is some ideas that the EU wants to discuss at this meeting, we would also be interested. We also note that the decision that we took last year noted that any party that had information on alternatives to short-lived substances and practices to avoid emissions could provide those to the TEEP. And we did provide some information through the Secretariat on alternatives to dichloromethane. So this is perhaps something else that other parties may want to take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. We are now at lunchtime, and I see that Cuba has asked for the floor, so we will hold this discussion, continue this discussion after lunch. So we conclude our morning session now. Thank you very much. At lunchtime, we are proposing the informal group on the TEEP reorganisation meet from 1:45 to 2:45 p.m. in CR room, in CR3. Are there any messages from the Secretariat? No. Okay. So thank you very much. Bon appetit, and see you at 3 p.m.